It's been shocking to witness the footage of the invasion of Israel by the terrorist group Hamas, based in Gaza. To see Jews fleeing from a desert party with wild, angry, crazy killers chasing them down with guns. Young people enjoying themselves, being hunted, killed, raped, and kidnapped by vermin, the filth of humanity. It's almost impossible to reconcile such evil people still exist in our world. Living in a Western country like Australia, I just can't quite believe my eyes what I'm seeing on TV. The footage of particularly that animal throwing a bloodied, young, obviously terrified, petrified young woman into his car with her hands tied behind her back. Goodness knows what that poor young woman has already endured and is continuing to endure in the clutches of such evil and devilish creatures. God help her and sustain her. And the maniacal howls of Allah Akbar, truly chilling to behold. The true face of Islam for sure. I just wanted to share with you two short passages from the Bible that give prophetic insight into these current day events. Firstly, I'll turn to the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 16, and we'll complete our glimpse of these 21st century Israeli horrible events with a Hebrew prophet named Zechariah. Genesis 16:11. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. I've read for you the biblical origins of the Arab and Islamic people. Ishmael, born to Abram by Hagar, the Egyptian maidservant of Sarah. Now, of course, the history of the Arab people and the history of the religion of Islam is far more complex than the birth of Ishmael. But Muslims and Arabs alike venerate Ishmael. They lift his name up. They wrongly assume he was the son of promise given to Abram. Ishmael was not the son of promise, rather Isaac, born to Sarah, the wife of Abram. This passage incredibly tells us what Ishmael and his descendants would be like. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. In other words, the people who come from Ishmael and claim Ishmael as their progenitor shall be a wild and warlike people, unstable, wild, unreasonable, unable to be negotiated with, constantly at war with those around them. The Muslim Arabs that form Hamas in Gaza are exactly as predicted in the Bible 3,500 years ago. Wild, animalistic, fighting and warring with their neighbours around them, shrieking Allah Akbar as they commit their atrocities. Hamas is exactly as the Bible describes the descendants of Ishmael would be. You can't reason with such people who invade, rape, take hostages and kill. The only way to treat a rabies-infested, wild and dangerous dog is to put it down as humanely and quickly as possible. We all, as decent humans, feel an empathy and sadness for the common Gazan resident. people suffering under the erratic leadership of the Hamas ruling party. But it was these very residents who voted these wild Hamas animals into power. The Gazans willingly handed power to a group of evil thugs and wild-eyed terrorists called Hamas. To my mind, they got what they voted for. Animals, terrorists, wild men, unreasonable men, men who you can't negotiate with. The Hamas leadership ultimately are cowards. They stir up idle young men, indoctrinate them with hate and propaganda, arm them with weapons, tell them to invade Israel, kill as many Jews as they can, whilst they hide in secret underground bunkers, using the Gazan people they're supposed to represent as human shields in buildings above their deep bunkers. Well did God predict the disgusting behaviour of these wild Arab Islamic terrorists. We've all seen the footage of these roaming, raping, killing vermin invading the lands of Israel. The second and final Bible passage I want to show you is in Zechariah 9. In this chapter, God is teaching if you attack and oppose Israel, God will judge your nation. In verses 5 and 6, God turns his attention to judging the Philistines and the Gazan Strip. Ashkelon shall see it and fear. Gaza also shall be very sorrowful, and Ekron, for he dried up her expectation. The king shall perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. A mixed race shall settle in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. The lesson of the Philistines is, if you attack and oppose the people of God, expect to be judged by God. By the late 4th century BC, Alexander the Great destroyed all remnants of the once mighty Philistine people, religion, language, and culture, completely gone. The origin of the Philistines, according to Genesis 10:14, was from a great-grandson of Noah, Casluhim. They came from the progenitor of Egypt, Mizraim, another grandson of Noah. The modern-day Palestinians have taken their name from the ancient Philistines, Israel's ancient enemies. The name Palestine was placed over Israel by the Romans, who eventually grew weary of the constantly troublesome Jews. Hadrian, the Roman emperor, in the early 2nd century AD, renamed Judea and Galilee, Syria, Palestina. He did this in an unsuccessful attempt to remove any remaining Jewishness from the land. Hadrian did not succeed, and for 1900 years, Jews have persistently clung to ownership of this very land, as they did for 1600 years prior to Hadrian. Having a sense of humour even, the Jews took on the name Palestinian for themselves, until an Islamic terror group in the mid-20th century under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, the PLO, hijacked the name and term Palestinian for the exclusive use of Arab Muslims living in the Holy Lands. But the modern-day so-called Palestinians have no connections with the original Philistines whatsoever. Palestinian culture, religion, language, both written and spoken, and bloodlines are not in any way ancient Philistine. Palestinians are nothing but a mixed race, a rabble, cursed of God and cut off from the pride of the Philistines. Remarkably, God seemed to predict the modern-day Palestinians in Zechariah 9:6. The Hebrew word here is very strong. They are an illegitimate people, literally bastards. And they never learned the lesson of the oracle against the Philistines by the Hebrew prophet Zechariah. This lesson is, curse the Jews, fight against the Jews, and God will judge you. God will ultimately destroy you. But the Palestinians still rant and rage against the Jews. and live under the judgment and curses of God as a consequence of their actions. This latest attack against Israel by Hamas will only end with great judgment and suffering for the Gazan people.